Yes, it works now. Okay, thank you everyone for being here again. So today is the inaugural research training that we have for our co-learning activities as part of the Engaging the Academy project. So the research training of today will focus on community-based participatory research, or CBPR, as you can see. And here are the names of the leadership team of this project: Evelyn Vasquez, Anchini, Manasi Rajajaksa, Kimberly Lakes, and Lisa Molina. For the purpose of our project as well, we want to recognize the land acknowledgement. So we at UCR would like to respectfully acknowledge and recognize our responsibility to the original and current caretakers of this land, water, and air, the Cahuija, Tongva, Luiseño, and Serrano peoples, and all of their ancestors and descendants, past, present, and future. Today, this meeting place is home to many indigenous peoples from all over the world, including UCR faculty, students, and staff, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these homelands. So, hello, hola. So we had already our introductions. For some of you that just log in, also, if you would like to introduce yourselves, I'm going to stop our presentation. Just to give a little bit of space of any of you who might just joined. Okay, you can always have the opportunity to present yourself via the chat as well, and we can read your comments. Thank you. So the goals of our talk are 3. So as you can see here, it's provide information on what it means for community and academics to partner in research. Number 2 is to share examples of a community academic partnership. So we are going to focus here on our story. And finally, we will be discussing some opportunities to engage in patient-centered and comparative clinical effectiveness research. So we are also very lucky and happy to collaborate with 2 big organizations. We collaborate with UCGPC, which is the University of California Council for Graduate and Professional Students. Also, we are partnering with Solid Ground Wellness in Recovery. So Lisa Molina, she's part of this association, and also she will talk a little bit more of her role. And also we are partnering with UCR Health and UCR Healthy Campus. This project is an engagement award funded by the Patient Center Outcomes Research Institute, or known as PCOR. So what do we know? So we know that there are some structural aspects of higher education. So we know that there is a wide middle income, ableist, and cis-male perspectives that dominate higher education institution. We also know that the higher education system is hostile and toxic towards historically marginalized communities, particularly for communities of color, low income, and also for immigrants communities. We also know that low-income female and BIPOC grad students appear to experience the greatest mental health burden and context-driven anxiety. And on the top of these structural aspects of higher education, there have been also scholars who have been talking about grad student mental health worldwide as being alarming. And also we know that the COVID-19 pandemic has worsened the mental health conditions of this patient population. So this lack of empirical understanding on how multiple marginalized identities intersect and lead to mental health disparities is the driving force of where Engaging the Academy project. So remember that this is not a research project. However, two research projects have informed our current capacity building project. If any of you have any questions or at any time, please feel free to share those or raise your hand. So here is our story. In 2020 and 2021, we started our first seeds of growth and hope. So we started the Social Connectedness Project, which was a photo voice project. And I will be sharing with you some of the photos and narrative that our participants share with us. Then findings from this photo voice project informed our second project, that was a cross-sectional study. And some members of our steering council and mental health task force were actually part of this cross-sectional study. So as you could see, we have been slowly developing engagement from different stakeholders across the year. And finally, we have our current project, which is capacity building project that started last year on June and will end in May 2024. And the title of our capacity building project is Engaging the Academy. So the research training series that we just started today are part of this project. And the main purpose is to build the capacity of patient and stakeholders to engage in research. So the Photo Voice project, some of you might say, okay, but what is Photo Voice? So Photo Voice is a participatory action research method that uses photography to represent the levels of social connectedness, sense of belonging, and mental health conditions of graduate and professional students, particularly those who were part of historically marginalized communities. This project was funded by UCR Healthy Campus, and you can see, I will share with you some images and narrative that were shared by our participants. And this approach, it is action research method because the findings of these projects tend to inform future community-based interventions or also even decision-making in policies. So it is grounded in the empowerment of the participants. So 3 research questions guided our Photo Voice project. As you can see here, the first question was pointing out about the narratives. So what are the lived experiences of graduate students, particularly those who are from historically marginalized communities, attending Hispanic serving institutions in the Western United States? The second question was, in what ways have the structural characteristics of the academic profession influenced grad students' perceived levels of isolation or social connectedness? And the last question was, from the perspective of graduate students, what are the interventions that might decrease their levels of isolation in graduate school? As you could see in this table, most participants self-identified as low-income students and also as first generation. Some of these participants also self-identified as being non-binary or coming from rural backgrounds or also being members of LGBTQ+ community. And also I want to point out that all the participants chose their pseudonyms. And also, as you could see here, we had participants that were at diverse stages in their graduate or professional careers. So here is an example. So this is an example from Lupe, a female grad student in social sciences. So she said, "It is challenging to find a safe place to live with the salary that we are provided as grad students. This image is of my gas stove after having a gas leak, which was a frightening experience, but which in large part had to do with not being able to afford a different place. Given that my family was located across the country and their funds are limited, it was difficult to feel that I could reach out for help with this situation." And here's another example from a male grad student. So he said, "As a kid, I lived in a rural area in my hometown, Oaxaca, Mexico. This picture represents the poverty that I lived in. I never had the idea of attending school. At home, there were other priorities such as working to contribute to family. Although I struggled to continue my education, I never quit from pursuing a degree in science. So our participants at the end of this project, we had a focus group and we discussed what could be the themes that they would like to use to categorize the photos that we're taking. So here are the 5 themes that they chose. Family, memories of home, and support system was the first. Then we have the pressures of grad student life, then social states of being, social connectedness, and social separation while a grad student. This project played a key role for our current Engaging the Academy project because findings from the photo voice inform our framework of engagement. So as you could see here, we are sharing with you the structural vulnerability and mental health disparities model. That is a model that Dr. Cheney and I have worked in the last years, and hopefully we will have our manuscript ready for publication soon. So this framework is based on the lived experiences of living with mental health conditions in the context of graduate and professional education. So as you could see, we identified 3 main aspects that were shared by all of our participants and that were seen as the driving forces that might inform their access to their limited access to mental health services on campus, but also their poor mental health. So one is finance, inadequate income, environment, particularly hostility in their academic and work environments, and a lack of positive or encouraging mentorship. So it's like the lack of role identity verification. And so going back to the training of today, remember that we are sharing with you some information of what it looks at community-based participatory research, right? And also we are sharing our story. So now we are going to start also going a little bit more in depth into what is research, what is community-based participatory research, and also some ways that you can engage in our project. Thank you.
Okay, so any questions up to this point? Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what research is, and then we'll shift and talk about patient-centered research, the different kinds of community-engaged research that we do, and then really focusing on what is patient-centered research in the context of PCOR, which is Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, which funded this research, as well as clinical comparative effectiveness research. And just as Dr. Vasquez mentioned, at any point, feel free to put questions in the chat or raise your hand. So what is research? Well, the most basic definition is a systematic investigation. It's guided by questions, and it's to establish an evidence base. And from this evidence base, we identify conclusions and then our implications. When we think about the context of research that we do, and we think about this project Engaging the Academy, we are focused on health outcomes. And we're focused on what kinds of conclusions can we have that will have public health implications and clinical implications. So research has a very long tradition and legacy of colonialism. When we think about traditional kinds of research, very much the idea of fly in, fly out investigators. And this type of research dictated who, or historically has dictated who does science and who creates knowledge. So in traditional models of research, when we think about who does science and who creates knowledge, who does that? So this is a question for you all. When you think about maybe the tradition that you've been taught in, who is it that creates the knowledge?
Well, thinking about anthropology, it was usually like older white men, scientists, academics creating that knowledge.
Exactly. So the idea of scientists, academics, those who have the expertise, right? Or those who we think hold the expertise, who we attribute the expertise to, which has traditionally, just as Jose mentioned, been research has been conducted by white men. That is historically who has conducted research. And so that means that when we think about knowledge creation, if we assume that the expert is the academic, it's the academic who's creating the knowledge. So PCOR shifts that. They focus on patient-centered research. And that means that the voice of the patient or caregivers of patients in the broader healthcare community has a stake. That means that their voice, their perspective, their experiences should also shape research because they too are experts. So research done differently is PCOR's motto. And I will actually share my screen in just a moment to share some more information with you about PCOR. But their institution, which is a federally funded institution that began with the Affordable Care Act, is all about disrupting research, how we traditionally think about how research has been done. And so it's a paradigm shift from researchers, the idea that researchers hold expertise and generate knowledge, to patients and communities hold expertise and they co-create knowledge in collaboration with academics, with healthcare providers, with experts, or so-called experts. So Evelyn, I'm going to share my screen for just a second. First, I'm going to share this link with you all. This is just a very general overview of PCOR, which stands for Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute. So PCOR has funded a number of projects that I have been on and that Lisa has been part of and that Evelyn has been part of, or Dr. Vasquez. And PCOR, just as you see here, their trademark is research done differently. It is about outcomes that are most important to patients, not outcomes that researchers think are most important to patients. It's about engaging a range of healthcare stakeholders. So this means patients, caregivers, scientists, clinicians, health systems, and insurers, that these diverse stakeholders can contribute and should contribute to research. And it requires, for any kind of funding, for example, from PCOR, it requires that patients are engaged. So it's a very different idea of how we do research, and very much it's about changing the culture of research. So I encourage you, if you want to learn a little bit more about PCOR, to take a look at this 2-page handout that they have that really gives an overview of when their research program began, why they began their research program, and what it is that they do differently to really emphasize the patient-centered perspective and approach to projects that are funded by PCOR. Which, just to emphasize, this project, Engaging the Academy, is funded by PCOR. So next slide. So let's take a moment to talk a little bit about community-engaged research. Oh,
I'm sorry.
The previous one.
Yeah, let me go ahead.
Okay. So I heard when you all did your introductions that some of you are PhD graduate students, or maybe you're in a master's program. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about this because I want to illustrate that the kind of work that PCOR funds, which is patient-centered, also involving diverse healthcare stakeholders in the research, is important. And that dovetails really well with community engaged research, which is an approach. So there are different methods, right? Some methods, they could be qualitative methods, quantitative methods. They could be the photo voice method, just as Dr. Vasquez talked about earlier. It could be cross-sectional survey, just as what we used in the Healing the Academy project. But this is an approach, meaning that this is how we think about the relationship that we have between the academics, the community, and the research, or in this case, when we think about PCOR, the patients or the healthcare stakeholders. So when I talked about previously traditional models of research, we can consider it to be university-driven research. This is an example on the far left of this spectrum is university-driven research or traditional models of research. There's very little community involvement. So some of you might be doing university-driven research, and there's nothing wrong with that. It might be that within the kind of work that you do, that's really the model that works best for the research question that you have. I would though argue that there's always an opportunity for community at some level to be involved. So this is how traditionally research has been, very university-driven. There's very little involvement of community in the research. And then there's community-placed research. So I like to think of this a lot. When I was in my first position, we did what I would consider to be community-placed research. So that meant that we had an office within the community where we were recruiting individuals. And instead of asking our participants in the research study to come to the university, we would ask them to come to our office in the community. So this is community-placed research, meaning that we were reducing some barriers to accessing the university, which often is considered to be an ivory tower, and sometimes it's very difficult to access because of parking or just ideas and attitudes about the university. And then you move along the spectrum to the right to community-based research. So community-based research is the idea that you are engaging the community, you're considering the needs of the community, and maybe the community is helping with recruitment. Maybe they are helping with dissemination of material. So there's some involvement of community, but they don't yet have a seat at the table, meaning that they're not involved in the decision-making. It's more the idea of the academic team is leading efforts and they're engaging community along the way in different aspects of the research. And then there's CBPR, which is considered to be community-based participatory research. Sorry, I had to think about that one for a moment. So community-based participatory research is the idea of shared decision-making, of co-creation of knowledge, having community members be part of the leadership structure, the design of the research study, the questions that are being asked, and involved in the data collection, the data analysis, and dissemination efforts. So this project lies along the lines of community-based participatory research. And then to the very right of this spectrum is community-driven research. And this is really where the investigators get out of the way, at least the academic investigators. And it's about thinking of years of capacity building in which community members have the skill set to be able to ask the research questions. And they're the individuals who are really driving the research itself, from the design of the study to the research questions, to the data collection, data analysis, dissemination of the data, getting the funding. This is a very unique type of research that often is not done, but absolutely happens. So I would say I have a study that's right now funded by PCOR on childhood asthma, and it is definitely a community-driven research project. Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, this project is an example of a community-based participatory research approach. So there are different methods that we are using. And again, this is not a research project per se, but there is some research that's being done throughout different phases of this project. But really, this is an engagement award. So it's intended to build capacity and to prepare you all, if you're interested, to think about, well, what do we need to do in terms of research? focused on the mental health and well-being of underrepresented, currently and historically marginalized graduate students. So when we think about CBPR for its acronyms, it focuses on shared decision-making, the creation of knowledge together, so academics and patients coming together in this case, creating knowledge and sharing resources. So when we think about PCOR, we always make sure that part of our budget monies are going to the community, that they're going to healthcare providers, and that they're also going to community members as well, or patients involved in the project. We co-develop the research questions, the study design, and the methods together. Within CBPR, the idea is to collaborate, to carry out data collection, analysis, and interpretation, and to also co-write publications, presentations, and reports, and very much to consider what are the ways in which community members would be most likely to consume the information in the way of what would be the best channel to disseminate our findings. We know in the academy, our currency is publications. So we're expected to write manuscripts, submit them for peer review. We're also expected to present at national or international conferences. There's less value given to writing community reports, or something that we consistently have done in many of our projects, having community conversations in which we share the information in a way that's non-academic and that's much more accessible. Okay, so this is an image, again, of the CBPR process of community-based participatory research, but specifically focused on the process. So I'll walk through this. On the top, I want to point out in red, this is basically the perspective of the community. So thinking about the role of the community in this sense, keeping the research respectful, accessible, and socially relevant. And then here on the bottom in blue is the academic. So what do they bring to the table? Keeps the research scientifically sound and academically relevant. So this image is intended to illustrate the different roles, expertise that community and academics bring to the research process. So when we think about development from the community side, so the idea is that the community will uphold the priorities, whatever the community priorities are. They'll bring that to the research. They'll ensure that the work that's being done is relevant. Whereas from the academic standpoint, does the research have scientific value and merit? Will it meet the priorities of the funders? When we move on to the next step, so this is again in the development phase, thinking about what are we going to investigate? What's the problem? How do we describe and define the problem? What's the study design? What kind of funding we'll be able to obtain for this project? As the next step, when we go to implementation, so that's, we've designed it, we've developed our research questions, we've gotten the funding, now we're going to implement the study. So the community will think about, okay, are the instruments accessible? Are we using the right language? Is the recruitment safe? Is it a good strategy for recruitment? Will we be able to engage the patients that we want to, or the community members that we want to in this study? And then the academic thinks about, okay, is it safe and scientifically appropriate? Are we using chain sampling? Are we using purposive sampling? Are we randomizing? So that's the thinking that the academic would bring to this phase of the research, and of course, ensuring rigor. When we move on to the next step of dissemination, so this is where we've collected, analyzed the data. Now we're getting ready to draw our conclusions, figure out what is the public health significance, what kinds of interventions could come from this, how are we going to translate our findings to the academic scientific community, or the community at large, the patient community, community outside the academic walls. So when we think about the community's perspective, they're thinking about how are we going to share this information in a way that it will help the community, that it can be used, that it can benefit the community, individuals can move things forward. Whereas the academic might be thinking about How do we use these findings, these conclusions to build on existing theories? Or how can we publish these findings? So you can see that there's importance and value in the community and academics coming together. Okay, so what is patient-centered research? So this is the idea where health outcomes, patient-centered health outcomes refers to the inclusion of outcomes that are meaningful and most important to patients. So rather than, again, the researchers identifying what the outcomes will be, it will be that the patients themselves are involved in the process and making decisions about what the outcomes should be. And this is really important. So we might think, for instance, in the context of education, that for students, as an academic, I might think, okay, if we're doing a study around mental health, then the most important outcome that we want to measure is depression and anxiety, because we know that there's high rates of depression and anxiety among student populations. That may or may not be the priority of a student. They, for example, might be most concerned about finishing their college degree, right? Their college program. They might be most concerned about getting the degree so that they can then move on to the next step, the next chapter, finding a job, for example. And if we don't take the time to ask students what's meaningful to them, then we could be really missing an opportunity to have outcomes that are meaningful, in this case, to patients. So this is the idea with PCOR that it's patient-centered, that we can't assume, based on the background as our background as academics, or even as healthcare stakeholders, that we know what's most meaningful to patient populations. And the outcomes are going to differ per patient population and, of course, per research study, and that it's critical for us to have conversations with the patients themselves to identify meaningful outcomes. And, if any of you are, I guess, let's see, I wanted to say quantoids, but frame it more so as individuals who use quantitative methods. When I'm thinking about outcomes, I'm thinking about our dependent variables, right? Which we tend to objectively say, okay, well, I'm going to look at the associations between this independent and this dependent variable. Well, what PCOR says is you should have patients involved in that thinking. And normally we wouldn't talk about it as your independent or dependent variable. And what PCOR suggests that we do is think about, at the end of this project, what do we want to improve? What is it that we want to see, and how is that meaningful to patients? Next slide.
Yes, I just would like to add that one of the roles and learning outcomes that we had during this project, the Engaging the Academy project, for instance, is the language. So first, we name our project Engaging the Academy to address the mental health needs of underrepresented graduate students. And then after meeting with our steering council and mental health task force members, they both agree that we should not name this patient population as underrepresented. So they, for instance, they suggested to change the language and the title of our project to make sure that we are using the concepts and the words that are meaningful for them. So that's why also right now we are, our project is slightly different, but we do this after hearing the feedback and the recommendations of our stakeholders and experts who are our graduate and professional students who are part of the project.
Thank you. Okay, so when we think about patient-centered questions, so these are in some ways guiding principles. So you want to think about the following questions as being questions that can help guide our research. Question number 1, given my personal characteristics, conditions, and preferences, what should I expect will happen to me? So again, this is from a patient perspective. Question number 2, what are my options and what are the potential benefits and harms of those options? Question number 3, what can I do to improve the outcomes that are most important to me? Question number 4, how can clinicians in the care delivery system they work in help me make the best decisions about my health and healthcare? If you take a look at the link that I shared with you in the 2-page handout, PCOR talks a lot about they fund projects that help patients make decisions that are best for their health and well-being. So it's so much is about, and what we are doing in this project is about empowering patients, empowering community so that they have the tools and the knowledge to make decision-making within the venues that they are. In this case, it's in the context of healthcare services. So PCOR focuses on patient-centered comparative clinical effectiveness research. And so you might ask, what is that? What is CER? You'll hear us a lot talk about PCOR and CER. So according to PCOR, comparative clinical effectiveness research compares the effectiveness of 2 or more interventions or approaches to healthcare, examining their risks and benefits. CER findings assist clinicians, patients, and other stakeholders in making informed decisions that improve healthcare. So I'm going to pause for a second and ask anyone if they know any examples of interventions or curriculum or programs that are used in mental health care or substance use services. And then once we have some examples, I'll walk through and explain, so what is patient-centered comparative effectiveness clinical research? Any examples?
Sorry, and you're looking for evidence-based practices that are used within treatment?
Sure.
Okay, so cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT services. Another one would be motivational interviewing.
Okay. Do you have any examples of specific interventions, Lisa? Like seeking safety or?
Well, I know that like there's matrix model, there is trauma-informed care, like that. Those 2 would probably be more specific than the CBT.
Okay.
That
so we'll
works?
just talk through, we can talk through CBT and then motivational interviewing. So when we think about comparative effectiveness, clinical research, what PCOR is really talking about is different ways of improving health. And what this project, Healing or Engaging the Academy, our goal is to build the capacity of patients and stakeholders, individuals like yourselves who are invested and interested in this topic, for example. It's to build your capacity to partner in research that is patient-centered and comparative effectiveness clinical research. And so that means that we would be talking about, okay, if we recognize that depression and anxiety are very high among student populations that we would identify or indicate as current and historically marginalized graduate students, then we would think about, there are 2 different models. There's cognitive behavioral therapy, and there's motivational interviewing. And we would find interventions that use these 2 different approaches. Seeking safety is an example of an intervention, a specific intervention that uses cognitive behavioral therapy. I can't think of a specific example of motivational interviewing off the top of my head. We would design a study that would compare these 2 interventions. So we know that, as Lisa was saying, they're evidence-based, meaning that they've been used in research studies previously, and they've shown to have positive impacts on outcomes, on health outcomes. What we would do is think, okay, so in the past, this research studies have looked at X, Y, and Z outcomes. Let's ask students what would be the most meaningful outcomes if they were in a program in which the focus was on cognitive behavioral therapy and they were learning how to process their trauma, for instance. We would ask them, what would be meaningful to you in terms of outcomes? What do you think would be most meaningful after participation in this 12-week program? And so we would have two different interventions that have already been proven to be effective. And those would be the focus of our research. We would be comparing the outcomes of participation in one or other of these programs. And the design would likely be a randomization, so you wouldn't know which program you would get into, but you'd get into one of the other programs. But the process would be coming together with patients and other healthcare stakeholders to think about what interventions might work for this particular population, given their background and characteristics in the health need, and then what is the most meaningful impact from the perspective of patients that this program could have. So that's comparative effectiveness research, again, in the context of patient-centered research. Any questions about PCOR, comparative effectiveness research? Oh, positive parenting program, exactly, right? So the focus, let's say, in the context of this research, that we realize there are really high rates of depression and anxiety amongst parents who are also students. And so we collectively come together and we decide, well, students who are also parents are most concerned about how they do both. And the struggle with balancing these competing priorities affects emotional and psychological well-being. And so we would come together and talk about what are the most important things that parents, this group of student parents, what do they want to do in terms of, what do they want to see in terms of improvement? Maybe it's their quality of life. Maybe it's the health of their children. So traditionally I would think, oh, the student who's also a parent, they want to sleep better. They want to have improved mental health, but maybe that is not what they're concerned about. Maybe they're really concerned about some other outcome. So great example. And another thing in PCORI, so I also see, Elisa, your comment that it's not specific to graduate students, but of course it can be. And one of the things that we also do in this research, if we realize that an intervention that might be evidence-based, again, the idea that it's proven in previous research studies to be effective in terms of impinging upon positively outcomes, we can adapt it. So you can adapt an intervention so that in this case, it would speak to the needs of a student parent population.
Okay, thank you so much. And so any of you have any questions or comments on what Dr. Cheney shared with us? Okay, just remember that you can also share your comments and questions in the via email or in the chat. Thank you so much, Dr. Cheney, for sharing this important information and the foundations for our project. So thank you for sharing all this information with us. So now I would like to invite some members of our team to talk a little bit about their roles in the Engaging the Academy project, and as well as some of your experiences of being part of a community-based participatory research project. So first, I would like to hear from Dr. Connie Marmolejo from the WELL, and also she is member of our steering council.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Vasquez. Thank you for inviting me to be in this platform and being part of the steering council. So I have been working with Dr. Cheney and Dr. Vasquez for a while on their amazing work and projects. And part of the ask of like why I was invited to be part of this group is that as not only the interim director of the WELL, which is the health promotion department at UCR, I'm also the mental health educator. So I work closely with students. Specifically based on this work, graduate students on student mental well-being. So really, as I was invited and they discussed community engagement, just getting different expertise from various stakeholders, right? So from the health promotion side, what is the work that is being done in terms for graduate students? What prevention efforts are being done or collaborations? Where are the gaps? So part of the work that I did with them is not only participate in a survey development where a committee was involved to really assess graduate mental health. And then from there, another example, when the Photo Voice project that Dr. Vasquez shared, how to disseminate that to the community. So we work closely on an event to really highlight the Photo Voice project and invite leadership. Because as Dr. Vasquez shared, not only is the work to although it's not research, it's still part of the research work, but really decision making, right? Policy making. So for example, the Associate Vice Chancellor of Health, Wellbeing, and Safety was invited to the Photo Voice project. They presented on the importance of mental health, and graduate students were able to ask leadership what steps are being taken to support graduate mental health. What are the next steps? What are we looking at in the next year? So really engaging the students in these conversations and really creating actionable steps to the work that we're doing as a collective.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this wonderful introduction to all the different roles you have, Connie, but also to the different roles that you have had in the different projects that we have been partnering together. So now also would like to introduce our wonderful grad student researcher, future doctora, Manasi, and also she is one of the colleagues of our mental health task force. So Manasi.
Thank you, Dr. Vasquez. Hi, everyone. My name is Manasi, and I'm co-leading the Mental Health Task Force along with Dr. Kimberly Lakes and Dr. Ann Cheney. Talking a little bit about the task force and what we do. We are essentially a diverse group of graduate and professional students, faculty and staff members, and healthcare providers who have this common vision of promoting positive mental health outcomes in graduate students. And that is what our work essentially focuses on. So the Mental Health Task Force forms a significant part of this project, with the main responsibility of the task force being developing and disseminating the several co-learning activities that we are hosting as part of the Engaging the Academy project. So the task force meets once every month and works on all these presentations that are then brought to you as our audience, not just actually working on the PowerPoints per se, but really thinking about what is going to be the content of these presentations and what is important and what needs to be included and what needs to be put out there. The main goal is really to build capacity across the several UC campuses and also in the community, and create more awareness on graduate student mental health concerns, mental health disparities, and the need to develop better or more on-campus and off-campus resources to support graduate student well-being. So that is our larger aim and our overall goal. I think being part of a CBPR project is very different from any other typical research project. Because like Dr. Cheney mentioned, there is this shared responsibility and decision-making, and you're really working together as a community with no hierarchical processes. And I think that is the best feature of this kind of approach. So that is my 1-minute elevator speech. I'm going to popcorn to Lisa.
Thank you, Manasi. So my name is Lisa Molina, and I'm a program director for Solid Ground Wellness and Recovery. And we're an outpatient behavioral health center that with a focus on substance use treatment. And we provide service both to youth, young adults, as well as the adults in the Inland Empire. It's exciting to be part of this. This is our second collaborative with UCR. And one of the roles that I have is that we do For eligible participants, we provide funding, a small stipend for their participation with the groups and for the mental health task force and the steering council, pardon me. And so then that is my role, is being able to get the funding or the payments out to all the individuals that are participating. One of the other roles that I have with this current grant is that we'll be doing another photo voice exhibit and gallery. And so that's slotted for March 8th of this year. And so my role was working on getting a platform and making that process happen. And so we are well on our way with that. And I hope that we'll have an opportunity to have, you know, all of these participants that are here join us as well. But we're a community-based provider. So there are services available to individuals that are in the UC system that are seeking substance use treatment or behavioral health services. And then we're able to be a provider for those services as well. And this is my second, like I said, second collaborative with UCR. So it's really nice to be invited back. Is there any additional questions or anything else that you needed me to cover, Dr. Vasquez?
Thank you, Lisa. No, it's okay. I just would like to know if any of our attendees have any questions or comments that you would like to share. Okay, thank you. Manasi, would you like to share the ways to participate? Thank you.
Sure, I can go over it. So there are really several ways in which you can support these initiatives and participate in the different activities that we have. I think we'll be sharing that in a minute, but we have several co-learning or capacity building activities that are coming up starting this month up until the end of June. And all of those are already on our flyers. If you want to attend these events, participate in them, that would definitely help us, have better engagement. You can also share our flyers that you already have access to, but we can also share that in the group, in the Zoom chat probably. So share our flyers with like other folks who you think might be interested in this topic. You can join our Engaging the Academy listserv just to make sure that you're getting all the notifications about all the upcoming events and activities. And you can also suggest a topic for future research, because that is like a really big part of what we are trying to do now, is really also, open up the floors and get more suggestions on how this research can be improved and what other topics can be covered in future research, that focuses on the mental health of historically marginalized graduate and professional students. So there are several ways in which you can participate and support our initiative. And I will also just very quickly share the post-event survey in the chat. It would be great if you can respond to that survey. Again, it just helps us understand, what we are doing right, how can we improve, how can, get feedback from the community. So I will just give me a second, post that in the chat. Dr. Vasquez, if you want to move on to the next slide.
Yes, thank you. I just would like to add that your responses to this survey are anonymous. So what we really want to hear from you, it is who you are, like particularly what is the group or the stakeholder community that you're representing today. So as you could see here, it is an example of the first section that you will see in the survey. So we ask you if you could please respond to these 3 minutes survey via Qualtrics today. And as you could see, you can self-identify the role that you better represent today. Like if you self-identified as university administrator, staff member, faculty, graduate and professional students, or other, please feel free to share your responses with us.
And this is the flyer that we have created, which basically includes the dates and times for all of our co-learning activities that are coming up, like I said, starting January up until June. So this month and also over February, we have our patient-centered research training series, 3 different topics. So the next one coming up is ethics in patient-centered research. And then we have comparative clinical effectiveness research. So an opportunity to learn a little bit more about CBPR and also PCOR, CER research approaches. And then like Lisa mentioned, we are hosting the virtual photo voice gallery exhibit. We shared like maybe 1 or 2 of the pictures and narratives that were collected as part of the Photo Voice project. But we have about 60 of these pictures and narratives that were shared by graduate students. And so we are creating a virtual presentation out of that. We also have several mental health educational workshops and podcast series coming up that are happening, I think, over the months of April, May, and then June. Again, focusing on some very critical topics around grad student mental health. So please join us for all of these events. If you can, spread the word, let your colleagues and friends know about it. We also, I think once like I share the flyer, it might be a little bit more clear. You can sort of like click on those links to like register for those events, but then also to get like more detail about what that event is going to look like. We couldn't just put everything on one flyer. So please feel free to go check that out and get more information about these upcoming events.
And I can just comment. Oh, Connie, did you want to comment?
Oh, no, I was just looking at the slide. Doesn't feel like I'm next.
So these are national resources that we'll be sharing at all of our trainings and activities. Just so that you all are aware, there's the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, SAMHSA's 24/7 National Helpline, and the National Alliance on Mental Health, or NAMI.
Thank you. And Connie, would you like to share any other resources or any other websites that you have heard that are helpful for our student patients?
Yes, these are all wonderful resources at the national level. And I know one thing that is highlighted is the now National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is now 988. So if you do text that, you will get support. But I also want to highlight that their offices are in LA County, the one office. So I still highly encourage folks that are in Riverside County to utilize the Crisis Lifeline, which is county local support. We don't want to shy away from the 988 suicide lifeline, but the pro of calling the crisis lifeline is that the person that does answer the phone call, they're very well known in the Riverside County area. So they'll be able to really highlight and connect you to somewhere in the county. So again, we don't want to shy away from 988, but just knowing, unless things have changed, that their office is in LA County at the moment. So I still highly encourage utilizing the county crisis lifeline. Another great resource that's not on here are campus resources. I know I have some great colleagues on the call. So UCR resources such as your counseling center, they do provide support to students. They provide clinical support. They are expertise in the field. So that is available to students. And there's also prevention support for well-being that the well does offer. So that's prevention. Clinical is the counseling department. Another thing, if you're interested in how to help someone in distress, the county does have great resources such as suicideispreventable.org, like Know the Signs. So really guide you how to help someone in crisis and what resources to get. So that's at the parent level, at a peer level. So really get support. And it's in English and in Spanish, which is really great. So there's a lot of available resources out there, and it's also supported by research, especially NAMI and SAMHSA. So there's opportunity. If you're ever seeking research opportunities, they do open up grants.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And well, also here you can see our website, and we invite you all to check our website and also follow us on Twitter if you haven't done so. Also in the healingacademy.com, you can find our community-based report that we wrote for our last project that was a cross-sectional survey. And well, we want to thank you all for being here. So we will be just sharing the link. Well, thank you so much, Manasi. Could you please all just take a couple of minutes and respond to the survey today whenever you can. And again, thank you so much for being here today and for all your support. We will be also sharing the flyer in the chat. So you all, I thank you, Manasi. So Manasi just shared the co-learning activities plan with you all. So thank you so much for your time and for your interest in collaborating with us, and most importantly, for your interest in learning about patient-centered research. So thank you. So now I would like to open the room and have a couple of minutes to hear about your perspective or your comments, just in general. Thank you.
Hi, if I may, so thank you for holding this Research 101, telling us more about the spectrum of community-based versus academic-centered research. I wanted to know if there are publications coming out from your joint efforts that we could perhaps start referencing when we're doing some advocacy work in system-wide spaces in the University of California.
So Evelyn, I don't know if you want to talk about the Voice Inclusion Recovery Project.
Yes,
yes. That paper.
Yes, so for the Voice in Collegiate Recovery, we just published a manuscript for that project. That is the project that Lisa was referring about. I'm sorry, she was talking about. So that project focused on college recovery, so students who are in recovery, and we just published a manuscript that we can just share it with you. And right now we are about to submit another proposal for PCOR as well. But for this project, what we are really trying to focus on is to identify culturally and structurally relevant interventions for BIPOC and for students who are members of the LGBTQ plus community. So this is how we are trying to leverage our BCR project and to expand our notions about the needs for students in recovery, but not just for those students who are undergrad. That it was most of our engagement efforts for the BCR, but for this new PCOR award, we're purposefully trying to engage graduate and undergraduate students. And for the current Engaging the Academy project, we are working on protocol paper So hopefully we can also publish it this year. And in the protocol paper, what we will be doing is to explain the different steps of our project. So the protocol paper just kind of, it's an outline of what is going to be done. And so others can read about our project, and also perhaps if they would like to collaborate with us, then also can do it. So we have diverse kind of outcomes. So you could see, for instance, more academic outcomes, which is like the peer review publications, but also we are very kind of clear that one of the most important outcomes for us are the community-based reports that we write, that we write with our co-leaders. So in the Healing the Academy project, there is a report. And so, for instance, you could see the report is in PDF, and all the members of our team were listed as co-authors. So this is also a way that how are we kind of really recognizing the role as experts, but also to recognize the work they have been doing as members of our steering council or also behavioral task force. So we will be also sharing those resources with you all. And also the other thing is that we have been invited to present our projects national conferences. So we're also trying to start perhaps expanding our engagement and also start publishing in other languages if possible. That this is also something that we have been doing for other community-based participatory research projects that specifically are on COVID-19. So many of our reports are in Spanish because we work with a lot of Latinx communities. Any other questions or comments? Or any of you would like to share briefly your experiences as part of our project as well?
So I just wanted to ask, because I know there are several students, did any of you find yourself thinking about the approach that you currently take, if it's more traditional or if it includes community or patients in some way?
I can share a little bit. So I'm in anthropology, and I know that I've struggled a little bit with how to incorporate, community-based work. Trying to understand, like, is this also like me being mindful of the limitations that our programs can probably have on us and on the research. So I'm just like having these workshops serves as a reminder to be more mindful and more intentional with how I structure my research in general, but like also like whose perspectives am I taking into account, who's involved. And I know that may be challenging as grad students, and maybe it's something that we may not get to do until we're like independent researchers or like professors. So just it serves as a great little reminder to make sure that I fit it into my project if it's something that's super important to me. And it's just understanding the challenges that I may or may not be able to, but I think the intention should be there.
Thank you, Gavi. Yes, and I think that it will be a really meaningful and wonderful if other faculty as well increase their awareness on this approach, because also to be disruptive into these power dynamics and then these hierarchies that exist in academia, might not be well seen from others, but from our perspective as healthcare advocates, and also I see myself also as a human rights advocate. So health, it is central for our well-being, right? This is like we're talking about the well-being of our communities and also collective healing. So it also it needs this change of paradigm, right? Paradigm, like who are we seeing us, but also how is that we see the work that we do, like what's the notion of research that we are following, and also just to be mindful that there are other research projects that are happening outside the ivory tower and that are actually disrupting these notions of hierarchies and that are much needed. So thank you, Gabby.
Yeah, and I just want to add that there's a funding mechanism that supports the disruption, and that's PCOR, which is suiting that PCOR was began out of the Affordable Care Act, because that too is a change in how we think about access to healthcare.
Thank you. Anyone else? Some final thoughts?
Hi. Hello, everyone. I'd like to share a little bit about my thoughts. I have been taking the PAR course before at SOE with Dr. Rodriguez almost 4 years ago. I found it's very interesting methods, and we wrote proposals to use PAR for projects, but we have not got opportunities to apply the methods to the research because it's very hard as an individual student researcher to engage the community and involve the resources to conduct the research. In my dissertation, however, I focus on voice the students' experience and make their voice heard about their experience of race and racism, because the international students is a marginalized student population and is under-researched in the higher education. Even though I didn't use PAR, my methods, including interviews, documentations, and focus groups, focus on the students' experience and voices, and aim to change the campus racial climate and beyond. So in my future project, if I have opportunities, I am very interested to continue and including to use the PAR in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing these. Yes, definitely. I think that, also as a grad student, I learned about this approach at the end of my PhD program. And I wish I could have been more aware about this approach earlier. So, there are some times when I just think about like, well, what could have been done if I could have taken this approach, right? So, but it is also a matter of just keep growing and keep learning. So yes, perhaps I was not able to do it for my doctoral dissertation, but I was very lucky to do it as a postdoctoral scholar. So this is also, a way for us, just a reminder, and then also just to share this information with others. So if you know any other graduate or professional students who might be interested in some of similar topics, or perhaps they are more into the critical perspective of science, also you can, just share these resources, or also even ask about some scholars or authors that they are reading, and also, in that sense, you can keep moving along. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Please keep us posted about anything you would like to hear or you would like to see in our project. And we invite you for our upcoming research training that it is also happening this month. So we will be sharing all this information again via email. We are trying to sending the fewer emails that we can a month. So that's why sometimes our emails are a little bit lengthy, but that is because we don't want to bombard anyone with several emails. So thank you again so much for being here. And so happy New Year, and hope to see you soon. Take care.